Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, licensed psychologist, group practice owner, and private practice coach. Many of y'all know that I have been using therapy notes as our practice EHR for over 10 years now. I've looked at others, and I just keep coming back to therapy notes because they do it all. If you're interested in an EHR for your practice, you can get 2 free months of therapy notes by going to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code TESTING. This podcast is brought to you in part by PAR. The NEO Inventory's normative update is now available with a new normative sample that is more representative of the current U.S. population. Visit parinc.com/NEO. Hey everyone, I am back today with a business episode. I'm talking with Brie Chrisman from Bosco. She's the founder and CEO of Bosco, which is an operations management company that works 100% virtually with mental health practice owners. She has over 15 years of experience in the project management and operations fields, and she's taken a different approach to making an impact on businesses. She has revolutionized the way businesses operate by introducing the solution for overwhelm for practice owners. Her commitment to being human first has led to her serving practice owners and folks in the mental health field specifically, which is a unique niche. And like I say in the episode, I'm very grateful for folks in these ancillary fields who have chosen to take us under their wings and help us with business things. So today we're talking all about onboarding. And when I say onboarding, I mean that whole process of getting clients into your practice and into their first appointment. And you might think, okay, there's not a whole lot to say about that. But as we dive into the episode, I think that will become clear that there is actually quite a bit that goes into the onboarding process. So we start with an overview just of operations in general, and then quickly move into a deep dive about the onboarding process. So we're talking about what should your website look like, and what are your calls to action to get clients to reach out? What do you do with those calls to action? How often do you follow up to get people scheduled? How many follow-ups do you do? What does the onboarding process look like once they're in your practice? How do you send paperwork? So all kinds of questions like that. So if you have ever found yourself with questions or feel like there might be gaps in that process in your practice, this is a great episode for you. And before we get to the conversation, of course, we are coming down to the wire as far as openings in my mastermind coaching groups, which start in the first week of February or on the first week of February. So if you're interested, if you're a practice owner at any stage of development and you'd like to join a group and get some support and some coaching to take your practice to whatever stage you'd like to take it to, you can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting and get a pre-group call to see if it's a good fit. All right. With that said, let's get to my conversation with Brie Chrisman. Brie, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Dr. Jeremy.
Dr.
Really
Jeremy.
Nice. Dr. Jeremy. I'll take it. You know,
Yeah.
I usually just do Jeremy and any opportunity to bring out.
Give the credit where credit's due. I'll do Jeremy the rest of the podcast.
Okay, that's fair. That was my moment of glory here. Yeah. Thanks. Well, I'm excited to chat with you for many reasons. One is because you live like 10 minutes from where I grew up in the small town area of South Carolina, which is totally crazy. We figured that out, and
Such
I
a
feel
small
a
world.
connection with you. Yeah, it really is.
Absolutely.
So there's that.
Yep.
But then you're also going to talk with me about operations and onboarding in our practices. And that's also a topic that I think a lot of us need some help with. So I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I was excited that we talked a month or two ago about what it would look like for me to come on the podcast, especially not being a therapist. And so, being able to talk about something that we're really passionate about and that also we can help therapists with is really, really great.
Yeah. Well, we're we're always grateful for you folks out there who choose to make a career out of helping us. So that's maybe a good place to start. I would love to know, like why this is important. Why pick mental health psychologists, therapists for your target audience, I suppose.
Yeah. So it was kind of a fluke, but it's a fluke that I'm glad that happened. So when I first started my company almost 5 years ago, I got some clients that were therapists, and then our company grew solely off referrals. And of course, those referrals came from therapists, and then we're therapists, and then 90% of our clientele were therapists. And so we really dug deep and figured out, okay, where do we want this to go? And so we love working with therapists of all kinds. We love being in the mental health space. I'm very passionate about mental health and making sure that we can advocate for ourselves and people who can't advocate for themselves. And it was great. And, I wasn't called to be a therapist. I was called to be an operations person. And this is kind of my way of being able to make an impact. But why it's important to us, this world that we live in is so chaotic, and we're getting bombarded all the time with so many situations and issues and things. And, as a practice owner, there are 8,000 and a half things that you have to do probably on a daily basis. You're carrying such an emotional load with your clients, but then you have a business to run as well. So what I am passionate about is making sure that we can take the burnout out of owning a practice. So that way, practice owners' mental health is a little bit better. And that trickle down effect, which you see all the time, when people's mental health is improving, the trickle down effect in their family, in the people that they interact with. So that trickles down to associate therapists, and that trickles down to their families and their clients, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of our little rock in the pond of how we can help mental health.
Yeah. I love that. I think we forget about that, as practice owners. I'm speaking for myself. It's easy to just take things on and keep going and, end up maybe, I don't know if I'd use the word burnout as something that has happened, but even like people have burnout as sort of like the rock bottom kind of place.
Yeah.
But even leading up to that, like if you're at a 8 or a 9 out of 10, you don't have to be at a 10 out of 10 for it to affect your work and your employees and your clients.
You don't have to be a 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
You just have really. But a lot of therapists that we work with are kind of at that, they've hit that proverbial wall where they're like, I just want to burn it down and go back to being like a solo provider with no EHR, just doing things on Google Docs and like just running, with whatever, like app-based payment. Or they want to grow, but they can't because they don't have the systems in place or like the training time to train people or way to onboard new people. And so they come to us and they're like, I literally don't know what to do. Or they've grown too fast and then everything is breaking. So it's kind of one of those three things really. And the solution is the same for every single one. So,
ooh, that sounds really nice. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
I've experienced all of those things at different points. Yeah. I'm guessing there are people out there who also have. So note to self, if you are considering burning everything to the ground and going to Google Docs and, a paper calendar, this might be for you.
Yeah.
So I would love to just tell people like what your company does. It's probably nice just to set the stage, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into this whole idea of operations and onboarding.
Yeah. So my company is called Bosco. We are a systems strategy and growth and operations agency. So we work with practice owners on the back end. So you think of like company growth or practice growth, you think of marketing and you think of client acquisition, client retention, that sort of thing. But that's not the only thing that is part of your practice. You have, your operations on the back end. So we really look at practices and see how efficient they're running, how their company culture works, what their day-to-day looks like, what the CEO's day-to-day looks like, and really helping practice owners remember that it's not just a practice. They're not just a practice owner. They are a CEO. They are a business owner. Even if you're the only person in your practice, you're still a CEO. And so being able to help them step into that CEO role and be able to lead and empower their team, and also maximize the resources that they already have, whether that's people or software or, whatever you're using to help you run your practice on a daily basis.
Yeah. I love that you're pointing out the whole CEO mindset right from the beginning. And it's so true. Like even solo practice owners, it's hard to wrap our minds around that identity. But
you don't really get, so out of all the schooling that you go through, how many business classes did you get?
0.
Exactly. So, there's so many, you look on Instagram or Facebook or just do a quick Google search of, how to run my practice. And I can tell you, there's probably pages on Google of different people that will tell you how to start a practice, how to grow your practice on Instagram or, marketing, networking, whatever. But there's no one really to help you, teach you how to run your practice, how to actually do the things you need to do to run your practice, because that's a total different beast. And the ones that do still focus on marketing, and they're like, we have operations, but it's not really, it's not really helpful, or it's DIY and they just throw a bunch of information at you and it's not helpful because it's not translated into non-operations terms. So we're trying to close that gap.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm glad that you're out there. Yeah. I feel like, it's really exciting to think about marketing and getting people in the door and that kind of thing. But back end, operations stuff is not like sexy exactly, and so it's easy to overlook it. And
so much. We think it's sexy on our end, but that's just because we're operations people. But yeah, you're right. It's not like the flashy, the revenue income reports that you have on Instagram, or, people say, well, I'm completely booked out, or I have X amount of clients, or we've brought in this much, but that's great. But what does your bottom line look like? Because you could be bringing in $1 million in revenue, but you could still be in the red, depending on how you're running your practice. And something that we've really been honing in on with our clients and kind of, constantly, banging our heads against the wall, like, shouting to people, is that if you keep your expenses low and you keep that bottom line low, then if you lose clients, you're not in like an oh crap mode. You're not like, oh my gosh, I have to get so many more clients. So that just makes your profits even higher.
Yeah.
I would say that expenses side is more important than obviously revenue is important, but when push comes to shove, expenses are easier to whittle down than adding more clients, and it takes less time and energy.
Yeah, exactly. So just to zoom out a little bit more before we get into the details, what's a good working definition of operations? I mean, we've used the term, the back end stuff, like but how would you define operations for anybody who might be unclear?
So the way that we define operations are the systems, the processes, or the strategies that keep your business running smoothly. So for practice owners, that could be your intake process. That could be how you onboard new clinicians. That could be literally a checklist of things that you have to look through every day to send to your biller. It's essentially your operations and your processes are anything that's a repeatable task or that has more than one step. You look at it that way.
Right.
And to really, really go down to the nuts and bolts of it, it is repeatable tasks and anything that's, more than one step. So that really is, it can be anything in your practice that's not. Somebody that I talked to a couple months ago, it's like the front end, like sales, and the back end feels like operations. And so anything that's not bringing in revenue necessarily, like truly, clients, marketing, things like that, are operations. But there's not to get too into it, but there's also operations throughout those things as well. But to make it as simplistic as possible, operations are the back end, that the expense is part of things that keep the cogwheels moving.
Right. So there's a lot of overlap with SOPs, I'm guessing, like standard operating procedures.
Yes, we love an SOP. Yeah.
Okay. I do too. A good SOP.
They're so good.
Right. So we're going to focus on client onboarding more than anything, which I love. This is a really important process, and it's also one that a lot of folks are kind of winging. And I'm excited to get your perspective, having worked with so many practices. And my sense is that you actually have some data and a process to talk about onboarding and measure onboarding, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing and honestly, we've worked with other clients in other industries as well. I just actually had a conversation with someone yesterday that's a lawyer, and he was like, I'm having an issue with following up on contracts. And so it was literally his client onboarding process. And we talked about, he's like, okay, well, when we go to this meeting, I was like, okay, back up. How do you get to the meeting? Like, oh, well, I send them an email. I'm like, okay, well, how did they find you? And so we literally had to back up multiple times. It's like, that's where they find you. That's where it starts. So that's another thing too, is, the client onboarding process. A lot of people think it's, just, when you're sending paperwork and then you schedule them for the first appointment. Like, no, it starts way back in, it really starts like when the marketing ends almost. Like that's where it gets taken in.
Yeah. Let's define that. So what would you say is the first step in the onboarding process? And then where do we go from there? Like, what are the major steps in the onboarding process?
Inquiry. So, and without going into like itty bitty details, but inquiry, consult, confirming that they are going to onboard, paperwork, scheduling first session, going through first session. And then of course that goes into clinical, and then going through, making sure that they stay onboarded. So that way they're not churning out at, some people do it's after 6 appointments, some do after 8. What is your churn rate usually? Or
we're lucky, just doing testing, there's really no churn. Yeah. Once people get in for the intake, they see the process through. Yeah,
that's true.
Which is great.
Yeah, that's true. You get that full completion process. So that's really it. Inquiry, consult, typically follow-ups, paperwork, confirming onboarding, paperwork, scheduling that first appointment. And then of course, with testing and stuff, I know there's multiple appointments and all of that, but I think that transitions into actual, existing clients and clinical and all of that.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So I wonder if we maybe walk through each of those steps in the process. And I would love to hear, how do we organize this? Like things that you're finding that work at each stage and things that are not working, or kind of pitfalls that people are running into at each stage. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the inquiry stage, we see a lot of people that just have their consults directly on their website, which I do think you should absolutely have the smallest barrier to entry to just get people in the door. So obviously, I had a client several years ago that was nervous about turning online scheduling on in her EHR. I was like, I promise you, it will make your life so much easier. And it did. And she hasn't looked back since. I will say though, that we find doing some sort of inquiry form before scheduling that consult is super beneficial for, screening those potential clients. So, if they say that, they have a specific insurance that you don't take, that's not wasting their time or your time. So you can reach out to them and say, hey, unfortunately, I don't take your insurance. I'm happy to see you out of network, but here's what it is. And then that's, you don't have to waste that 15-minute slot, especially when you're crazy busy. Also things, if somebody needs something that's like for, specifically we work with a lot of social workers. And so they get a lot of referrals for higher, like severe cases. And so a lot of those, really need to be more inpatient, or they need to see a specialist. And so that's not something that the clinicians that I work with are doing right now. So that's another thing, because, that's especially, we get a lot of, for this one client that I work with, we get a lot of referrals for like teenagers. And so it's their parents and they're just getting out of an inpatient center, and they're having to do, outpatient care. And so, it's stressful for the family. And so the faster that we can get them through that process and saying like, hey, this is not us, but here are some referrals for people that we know do really well. That's always great. And then you get the good rapport, and then you still get referrals from people because you're going above and beyond, even though you're not doing that consult. So having that inquiry form is definitely a really good way to screen people. We had a client last year that was nervous about clients, and she wanted more. She was nervous about, she hadn't had a client on board in a little bit, and she wanted to fill her caseload. And she's like, I think the barrier to entry is too high, so I'm going to take the inquiry form off and just go straight to consult. And we along with someone else on her team advised her, like, that's probably not a good idea, but if you really want to do it, we'll try it for 30 days. And it caused so many issues. And she had way more no-shows for consults. And she had there was a lot more work on the back end, because there wasn't a way for us, like part of my team as the admin support, because she's one of our admin support clients, that we can't see when she was getting consults. And so then she was having to do all the back and forth, and it was creating more work for her. And so it was just a cascade of things that just made everything worse. And so she's like, yeah, no, that was a bad idea. We're going to,
bring back the form. Yeah.
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 So, yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So let me get super granular here. I mean, when you say an inquiry form, is this typically just a form that people fill out on the website? Clients come to the website, they fill out the form, they submit it, and it goes to either the psychologist or the admin person?
Yeah. So what we have, the process that we've created over 4.5 years that works really, really well, is having a form. Typically it's a Google form, and we have a BA with Google for all of our clients. We make sure they have that, which is really helpful. But we have, you click the link to schedule an appointment, and it goes straight to this Google form. And then from there, it will put on the confirmation page, thank you for filling out the form. Click here to schedule your appointment. And so that will automatically allow them to go and schedule their consult. So that way it's a smooth process. And then, of course, with Google Forms, it comes into a spreadsheet. And then we have an email that goes directly to the admin support inbox that says that someone filled out the form. And so then we can go in and check and see, one, if they're a right fit, and two, if they actually scheduled their consult in Simple Practice, because, let's be honest, a lot of people will just skip that step and just close it out really fast. So then but because we have those checks in place, we're able to follow up with them and say, hey, thanks for filling out the form. We noticed that you didn't schedule your consult. Here's the link. And so that way we're able to do that a lot faster. But the form, since we're getting granular, a lot of times the form is, typical contact information, first and last name, email address, phone number, age. So that way we know if they're a minor or not. Where are you located? Because a lot of our clients are licensed in multiple states. Because that, that's a screener question. If they're in a different state, then we can automatically tell them we're not licensed there. Their session location preference. So whether it's in person or virtual, which therapist they're looking to have a consult with, any details that might be helpful for the consult, and then payment preferences. So if it's out of pocket, out of network, some of the clinicians that we have are in network. So we'll put like their name and what insurance panel they're in network with. So that way people know like, hey, so-and-so with Aetna. And so that way they can see who has what. Also ask their primary health insurance, and just have these are questions that we've added throughout the years, because it's like we've come into issues where people are like, oh, well, I have Aetna, but then don't realize that it's their secondary. And then it just, causes a world of problems. And I'm sure you've run into that.
Oh, sure. Yes.
So, and, having a note on there, it's like, heads up, this has to be your primary insurance. Another thing we've come across is third-party billing. So, those 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds that their parents or someone, a grandparent or someone is paying for their care. We've run into situations in the past with clients that a 20-year-old was utilizing her grandma's credit card. And and the grandma disputed the charges on her credit card. And so we ran into this whole thing. So now we have a process of third-party billing where we, have an authorization. So that way we can get, basically release of information for HIPAA. And then we have that person sign all the forms as well. So they know like, hey, you're on the hook for payment.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So things
Great.
like that, but it's, and of course, like, how did you find us? What's your communication preference? Things like that. So yeah, it's a lot of screener questions that we've just learned because from experience that, hey, we need to know this information up front. So that way we don't get hit in the back end of like, ooh, this is going to be an issue.
Sure.
So all of that stuff can be done on the front end, which is great.
That is great. Yeah. And I'm guessing there are probably some folks out there who are like, oh my gosh, what did she even just say? Like, you submit a form, it goes to a spreadsheet, then it notifies somebody. Yeah. But it's easy.
It is
just
easy.
Trust.
Yes.
It's easy.
Google
this
Forms
takes like 5 minutes to set up.
Yes. Google Forms are super easy to set up. And then you literally just click a button that says like export to spreadsheet and it automatically pulls it in for you. It's a piece of cake.
Yes. Yeah. Great.
And if you need help, just call us. We'll help you out.
Sure. Yeah. People can help. Yes. There are people to help.
Asking for help is not a bad thing.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of the inquiry phase.
Yes.
Where do we go next?
So obviously if they didn't schedule their consult, or I will back up a little bit. If someone reaches out from like Psych Today, My Wellbeing, on Alma, Headway, all of the places, or just emails directly on the website, sending emails with the form. So we have email templates that we have saved in Google that you can literally click buttons and just pop it right in. So, thank you for inquiring. We'd love to schedule a 15-minute consult. Here's what to expect. Here's the link to fill out the form, and then letting them know, like, you will fill out the form and then be prompted to schedule your call. So that way they know to look for that link.
Yes.
And then our policy is to send 3, depending on what stage we're in, like 3 follow-up emails after that initial one. Because we do find that if someone is going to respond, they will typically respond by the 3rd email.
Okay, I just want to highlight that because this is a big question. People ask us a lot in a lot of different circumstances, like, how many times do I reach out to someone before I let it go? And you're saying 3 responses. Like, is this coming from some kind of data, like that, people maybe don't respond to the first one, but they will respond by the 3rd one somehow?
It's data that we have collected over the years. And it's not just therapy. It's, ad sales. It's, asking for sponsorships. It's anytime that you're trying to convince someone. But the thing is, at the end of the day, therapy is a business. I mean, yes, that's very black and white, but you are technically selling something. And so it's really the same process, whether you're selling ads, selling therapy, selling jewelry, not jewelry, but like services, that it really does. Because a lot of people are like, oh, that looks interesting. I'm just going to leave it in my inbox for a while and I'll just get to it later.
Yes.
And then the second email, like, oh, right, I need to do that. And then the 3rd email, like, oh, shoot, I actually need to do that. Like, they're not going to leave me alone. They're reminding me. And a lot of times people are like, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to schedule the consult. And then typically we send another one just in case that it goes into spam. And a lot of times if you send multiple emails, especially if it's on the same thread, it will kick you out of the spam folder into the main inbox.
Yes.
So that's another reason why we do it. Typically the 2nd or 3rd email, it will kick you out of the inbox in the spam folder. So, because, that happens.
It does happen. Yeah.
So,
I just want to highlight that, like, just to say that again, that I think a lot of us, or at least a lot of my consulting clients, there's a fear of like pestering people or bothering people, being annoying, being salesy, being whatever. But the way you frame it makes a lot of sense. And that resonates with me personally. I mean, I get so many emails and I'm like, oh, that is interesting. And then everything in my life happens and I forget about it. And then like a couple more reminders. I'm like, okay, like good. Yes, I need to.
It finally bumps up to the top of the list once you get that third follow-up. And another thing too is you're not cold calling people. Like these are people that have sent you an inquiry of some kind.
Right.
They're a warm lead. So you are doing your due diligence to follow up with them because they reached out to you for therapy, for testing, whatever you are doing. You are supporting them.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with, therapy asking for help is hard. And so people might not be ready the first time you send it.
Sure.
And then it's just sitting in their inbox and you're like, do I, don't I? I don't know. And then, finally, and that it shows that you care too. Honestly, it's not a pester. It's the fact that you really want to help them.
Yes. Nice reframe.
Yes. Because I will tell you in my personal therapy experience, the amount of therapists that I've reached out to that don't even email me back is insane.
I hear that so often. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Crazy. I'm like, do you not want clients? And if you don't, great, then put that on your Psych Today profile that you're not accepting new clients. Or, just email me back. So having a dedicated, just being dedicated and just, treating people with a modicum of respect.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So, after that, obviously we have the inquiry. We have, once they get that, that email, they go through the intake process, or they go through the inquiry process where they fill out the form, they schedule their consult. If they schedule a consult like 3 weeks or more out, we typically reach out to them and say, hey, did you want to, and, maybe the clinician's on vacation or something, but they have spots open, on their, we could manually schedule. And so we always ask them, hey, do you want to get in earlier? And 8 times out of 10, they say yes. And then it just shows that, again, it shows that you care. And it's throughout the whole process, you'll kind of see as we're going through this, that every single step is creating a great experience for the client. And so if they want to feel safe with their therapist, that needs to be company-wide. It can't just be while they're in session. So creating that supportive net for them and making sure that they know that we've got their back is huge. And that starts at the first instance of communication.
I love that you mentioned that. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So consult happens. Typically all our clients do 15-minute consults. And then we have I'm using roughly basically the same client just as a preface. For a lot of my examples, I'm using the same client because she's been a client since I opened my company in July of 2020, and she came on in September 2020, and she's still around. So I've literally watched her, and she started her company in March 2020. So I've literally been there for pretty much the whole thing. And she's built a successful practice in New York City. And so and it's all the things that she's my guinea pig. So anytime I want to test a new software, I'm like, hey, you up for it? And she's like, yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Nice. She's like pioneering the operations stuff for us.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me, actually, when you mentioned software, I mean, up to this point, I'm just curious if you're using any software outside of Google Workspace. I mean, there's a lot of chatter about like CRMs and how do we keep track of this stuff? Is it anything like that, or are we just keeping it simple? Let's take a break to hear from a featured partner. Y'all know that I love therapy notes, but I am not the only one. They have a 4.9 out of 5-star rating on trustpilot.com and Google, which makes them the #1 rated electronic health record system available for mental health folks today. They make billing, scheduling, note-taking, and telehealth all incredibly easy. They also offer custom forms that you can send through the portal. For all the prescribers out there, Therapy Notes is proudly offering e-prescribe as well. And maybe the most important thing for me is that they have live telephone support 7 days a week, so you can actually talk to a real person in a timely manner. If you're trying to switch from another EHR, the transition is incredibly easy. They'll import your demographic data free of charge so you can get going right away. So if you're curious or you want to switch or you need a new EHR, try Therapy Notes for 2 months, absolutely free. You can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/therapy notes and enter the code TESTING. Again, totally free, no strings attached. Check it out and see why everyone is switching to Therapy Notes. Our friends at PAR have released the NEO Inventories Normative Update. The NEO Inventories measure the 5 major dimensions of personality and the most important facets that define each. Now with an updated normative sample that's more representative of the current U.S. population and fewer components for easier purchasing. Visit parinc.com/NEO. Let's get back to the podcast.
Up to this point, I'm just using Google.
Great.
Gmail. If you're using Microsoft, run away really fast and get on Google. Please.
Yeah.
Google Sheets. Gmail, Google Sheets, and Google Forms so far.
Great.
And then whatever your website platform is. So,
Fantastic.
which could be like Weebly. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can even create like a Google site if you really wanted to. Okay, so consult happens, and then with our star client, what we do is have the clinician has an email template that they send. It's a follow-up email. So if the client says like hard no, can't do it, they'll still send a follow-up email like thank you so much for your time, and they CC the admin team. So the admin team knows what to do next. And so they'll, offboard them from the EHR. They'll remove them from, and we always put a little note. We use Simple Practice for most of our clients. And we'll put a little, like an admin note on there saying like, we'll not onboard after consult. So that way, when we go back through inactive clients, we can see like, who is this person? Why didn't they not onboard? And then we know. But the people that are like thinking about it or are gung-ho about moving forward, the follow-up email will, they'll of course be really warm and say, thank you we're really excited to work with you. And then we'll specify some information. So it's like you were interested in having in-person sessions. We were looking at Wednesdays at 3 p.m. bi-weekly. My full rate or my rate is XYZ, or you are looking to use your in-network benefits with Aetna. And so it has, and like if, especially like the third party billing as well, you have another person that's going to be in charge of billing. And so what that does is confirms everything in writing from the consult, which is really important. And then also just notifies the admin team so that the clinician doesn't have to send the email to the client and then send another email to the admin team letting them know what's going on. So then we take, like the admin team takes it from there and we'll respond to within like, usually we give them like a day or two and say, if they haven't responded yet, we'll follow up and say, hey, I'm so glad that you and so connected. Please let us know how we can support you in onboarding or whatever. So from there, we, if they say, yes, I'd like to onboard, we get them scheduled for their appointment first, because we have been bitten in the butt with that. And I'm sure you have, where you send a bunch of paperwork and then they just ghost and don't actually schedule an appointment. And then that's more work for you. So we found, get them on the schedule for that first appointment and then send all the paperwork. And we have an onboarding email template that says, you'll be getting an email from Simple Practice. This is your client portal, yada, yada. You have a bunch of paperwork, fill it out 24 hours before. If they're, for this practice specifically is my example, they have use Alma for their in-network. So like you'll also be getting an email from Alma. This is where we submit claims and, you'll get all the information from that. So that way they know what to expect. Because that's also, if you're just getting random emails with a bunch of paperwork, you're like, what? Like, what is this? This is so overwhelming.
Of course.
And so letting the client know what to expect is so important too. And then, making sure that you're open for questions and everything like that. If they don't respond right away, we send typically 4 follow-ups for that, because they're already more than a warm lead. They've already gone through they've gone through all this whole process, and they've actually had the consult. And a lot of times the clinician will be like, well, I don't know why they didn't respond, because they were like, yes, let's do it in the call.
Right.
And they just kind of ghost. So, which, it happens. Yeah.
Right here. I'm curious why the clinician wouldn't go ahead and book the appointment from the consult. Like, why that extra friction, to CC the admin team and then have them follow up? So
that is definitely a personal choice depending on how your practice is set up. With this practice specifically, the way that the practice owner wanted it set up, that the clinicians solely can focus on clinical. They do a lot of their rescheduling, but admin it's basically, she set it up as a boutique practice, and it's really to focus on the therapy. And so the admin support team really takes care of everything else. They take care of scheduling, rescheduling, cancels as needed. We really make sure there's a boundary between anything clinical and anything admin.
Gotcha.
That's why.
So I guess maybe asking for those solo practitioners out there or others who might want to do it different. Do you see any downside to just booking straight into the appointment in the consult?
No, as long as you have clear communication with whoever. Obviously, if you're a solopreneur or a solo practitioner and you are doing everything yourself, then yeah, absolutely go ahead. While you're on the consult call with them, book it, send the paperwork, just do it right on the call. I think that's, it'll take you 2 minutes. So be like, yeah, I'm sending it to you right now. You should expect it in your inbox, just make sure you give a timeline of, please fill it out, 24 hours prior or 12 hours prior, or whatever, just so you can look it over, make sure there's no outstanding, weird things going on. If you have an admin support person of any kind, whether it's a VA, a whole scheduling team, whatever, if you want them to send the paperwork, you just have to make sure you have clear, open lines of communication. So if you are booking the appointment or booking the recurring appointment series, letting them know, hey, this person's a go. I booked them for the first appointment. Can you do the rest? And so that way you just communicate. Because that's where we find where you have the consult and you go right into the next session and then forget to tell the admin team, and then no one sends the paperwork, and then it's appointment time or the next day. And it's why didn't you send the paperwork? Well, because you didn't tell me to. So it's really just about that open, transparent communication too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Right. So from there, we make sure, we keep a close eye on paperwork, make sure we're following up. Typically about 3 or 4 days prior to the appointment, the first appointment, if their paperwork isn't done, we'll nudge them and say, hey, we noticed you haven't done it. Do you have any questions? And just keeping emails in a way that's not like, hey, you haven't done your paperwork, you have to get it done. It's like, hey, do you have any questions? We noticed that you haven't finished it. Anything we can support you on. And that's just reframing it in a way that is supportive to them, but also hey, get your stuff done.
Right.
Yeah. And then they have their onboarding. And then from there, it's really, it's clinician completely takes over. And then if they need anything with billing or scheduling, we just, we have great communication. So
great. So let me ask you a question about the paperwork.
Yes.
Have you found anything, because there's a lot of, again, debate about this, and people ask this question a lot, whether it's better to have basically how much paperwork is too much.
Yeah.
I feel like we have a million forms. We tried to simplify them, but it's a lot. Our demographic form is pretty long. So there's kind of a question of, do you do a longer demographic form or, do a shorter and then do more in the intake? What have you found just in working with a bunch of practices in terms of people filling out paperwork?
So I'm going to come at this question from a perspective of as an operations person working with practices, and also a person that has been to therapy and that has filled out 1.5 million forms for my child who is also in, play therapy, OT, speech, physical therapy. So I've done all of the intake processes.
Yeah.
I've seen them all.
Right.
I will say that I think that when you're talking about demographics or like intake questionnaires, having a lot of the quality of your paperwork, I think, is also important. So from that point of looking at, if you have a lot of open-ended questions, that can seem super, super overwhelming, versus if there's a way, instead of like, do you smoke? You could say, instead of having an open-ended question, you could just have a drop down, or a multiple choice question. And that makes it feel less overwhelming. And so being able to make it something like that makes it feel a lot quicker too, and a lot more manageable.
Yeah.
As far as, and like I say that coming from my son, tried ABA therapy earlier this year, or I guess in 2024. And with ABA, you have to fill out all the forms ahead of time before you're onboarded, or before you even have a consult, because they have to get you on the wait list and they have to know enough information about you. So I had to it would take me like 15 minutes to fill out these intake forms. And of course, they're all super negative, because you have to, be like, what's wrong with your child? And it's super fun.
Yeah.
But I applied to like 20 different wait lists, and it took me days to fill those out. However, I will say the ones that were a lot easier were the ones that just had like those multiple choice questions and things like that. I will say, from a business owner standpoint, I do not, how do I say this right? From a business owner standpoint, as whatever amount of paperwork gets you the information you need and covers you legally is the number of documents that you need.
Yeah.
So I have a client who, it's actually, her husband's a lawyer. And so she's like, she's paranoid about being ever audited or anything, or like, she's like, I don't want to be that person on the news that like, that, has the horrible malpractice and all. She's like, I'm not going to be the person on the news. I'm going to be locked in so tight on legal. We have all of our policies in place. No one is going to be able to dispute charges. Like we are locked in. And also a lot of information for clinicians. And it's 17 forms that go out for onboarding. But it's, there's the DOS screener, the GAD7, their PHQ. Like those are 3 of them. And there's like a therapeutic process understanding, confidentiality, the HIPAA policy, things like that. There's a COVID waiver, because that's required in New York. So all of that's a bunch right there that'll take you 5 minutes to sign. So it seems like a lot, but it's like, oh, it's a paragraph that I have to read and sign. Okay, great. So and I feel like that a lot of people put all of that on one document, and it's like 15 pages. And that almost feels more overwhelming than 17 documents sometimes. I guess it depends on the person, but I will say that from almost the start of her company, because I've been there for 4.5 years, we've had 3 people ever that said, I cannot do these documents. It's too much. That's it. 3 people for 4 years. And they average between 150 and 200 clients on their roster at a time.
Gotcha.
So, we're consistently onboarding like 10 to 15 people, or 10 people per month. So, it's a very, very small number. And you have to remember that you are a business owner. You're a therapist, but also a business owner. So the last thing you want is having someone come after you for some reason, of probably no fault of your own, of someone, even an ex of a client that is, abusive, or, someone who's mad about their daughter taking their credit card and then trying to sue you because, things like that. If you can cover yourself, then you're not going to lose your livelihood. You're not going to lose your reputation. You're not going to lose your license. And so it really is, I think the right answer is however many documents you need to get the information you need for your client and to cover yourself legally and financially is what you need. Just kind of a very diplomatic answer.
Yeah, super diplomatic. It's okay though. It's okay.
But it's yeah.
I mean, there's some of it just depends as well.
Yeah, it depends. And there's some that, I think there's one therapist that I went to that like didn't have any. I didn't even sign a HIPAA form. Mm-hmm. She's like, great. Let's do therapy.
Here we go. Yeah. You cool?
So, I mean,
yeah, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
If you want to burn down your company and just do paper calendar and stuff, I mean, do what you want to do.
That's a good plan. Yeah. Well, even this component of trying to eliminate open-ended questions from our forms, I get it. I mean, from a clinical standpoint, they're helpful, but from a consumer standpoint, yeah,
there's definitely some that you need, but there are some that can be multiple choice,
yes,
or like a multiple choice with a short answer, depending on like what. So, we actually just redid all of the intake forms for the same client. I went through all of her forms in November and audited all of them before we did new year paperwork. And the intake forms, a lot of them were I would be able to combine like 3 questions into one, where I could do one question, and then for each answer, it could be like you click yes, and then it pulls up another little box. It's like, okay, tell me more information here.
Yeah. Yeah, even having an eye toward simplicity, I think you're right. There's a lot that we could combine. There's some fluff in there. We're always trying to
honestly, revise. It even comes down to, formatting.
Yes.
And doing little, putting those little line spacers and headers and sections and bolding, italicizing, all of that. I mean, it just breaks it up so it doesn't seem as overwhelming too.
Yep, it goes a long way. Yeah.
The psychology of paperwork too. Which we won't get into.
That would be a great podcast.
I don't think I'm qualified for that one.
If you find me someone, send them my direction.
I will.
So big question, a lot of practices I think are collecting credit cards upfront upon booking. Are there any, but then there are many, who say, we don't do that. We're not going to do that. Any like best practices around that, or ways you found to sort of ease that process?
I have a very polar answer to this. This might be an unpopular opinion. I don't know. I do not like when someone asks for a credit card before a free consult.
Okay.
I feel like it feels overwhelming. It feels like, oh my gosh, why do they need my credit card? I haven't even decided if I'm going to go with this person. I'm doing consults with a couple different people. And then they're going to have my credit card information, which I'm not, super aggressive with. But then I'm like, it's just one more thing I'm going to have to delete out of their system and, all of that. Yeah. So from a personal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, I have seen where people don't go through with the paperwork for the consult. It's hard to get people to fill out paperwork for a consult, to be frank.
Yes.
And also, I have seen where people no-show on consults because they don't want to submit that information. Now, when it comes to actually onboarding and scheduling that first appointment, heck yeah, make sure you have that credit card before. And I even, if they don't have it before, we typically tell them, we have to reschedule your first appointment because we need all of your paperwork done.
That makes sense.
And so, yeah, that's kind of
great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like it's kind of, sorry, I have way too many thoughts running through my head right now. Getting people in for a consult for therapy is already tough. People have to be ready to go to therapy. And so then I feel like, asking them to fill out a demographics form is one thing, but asking them to like put their money where their mouth is and put the credit card on file for a free consult just seems like it's too much of a barrier to entry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I'm totally with you. And I should have clarified. Yeah, I don't know that we're trying to do a credit card before the consult, but before booking an actual appointment.
100%. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we typically, so because we book the first appointment before we send paperwork a lot of the time, we will say you have to have everything done 24 hours prior to the first appointment. And then if it's not, we reschedule that appointment out. Or we will say, actually, I think we've gone to the policy where, okay, once you fill out your paperwork, we will schedule that first appointment.
Yeah.
And so that way, they get one like buffer where like, we trust you to do the paperwork. And then if they don't do it, we're like, no, you have to show us that we can trust you.
Totally.
Boundaries.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust but verify.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So maybe we start to wrap up with a question that is almost, I'm not sure how to, I almost said like on the flip side or like the opposite problem, but it's all part of the deal. And that question is, how do we work with just a high volume of inquiries? So I'm guessing you work with some practices, and this full transparency, this is a very selfish question because this is our main problem. That's really why I do these podcasts, is just to answer my own questions.
Why not?
But the question is like, how do you deal with really high volume of inquiries? Like, I cannot just keep hiring admin staff to create more and more consult appointments, or answer more phone calls. So I'm curious how you think about a problem like that, where you're getting like way more inquiries than you have the time in a week to deal with.
That is where I would bring a CRM in.
Okay.
So customer relationship management. I will say I have used a lot of CRMs in my day. And before I started my company, I was in project management and event management. And so I've seen all of the project management tools, all of the CRMs. There's one that I have recently discovered that I absolutely love, and it's therapist specific. It's Wise Practice. They just launched in April, like they soft launched in April and then they fully launched in July, and they've done like 20 iterations since then. It's fantastic. And that's coming from an operations person.
Okay.
And if you need it, I'll send you my affiliate link.
Hey, I would love to. I would love to check it out.
Yeah. So the thing that I love about a CRM like Wise Practice is that it has workflows. And it has so a workflow, for anybody that doesn't know what that is basically an automated process that can do the steps for you. So what we can do, and for the client that I've been using for all my examples, we used to have Zendesk for like support tickets and things like that, where we could automate our follow-ups, which was really great. But Zendesk, their business model is terrible and their customer service is terrible and they're super expensive. So highly do not recommend them. However, something like Wise Practice, you can have that communication where you connect it's a two-way sync with your Gmail. It's fully HIPAA compliant. It is, you can do your workflows. You can do even documents through there. And there's other opportunities where if you do webinars and courses for other therapists, you can like using like Kajabi or something like that, you can pull all of that in there. Jeremy's like, oh my gosh, what is this?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I'm going to have to end our podcast now and go check out Wise Practice. Sorry, Brie. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's as long as you use my affiliate code. I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, so the cool thing that I'm excited to try it out with in typical business owner fashion. Like, I really want to build one out to test it out, and I don't have time. But that's my goal for, Q1 of 2025 is to test it out. But what we can do with it is have the inquiry form in Wise Practice. And once somebody submits it, we can send them like a thank you email and send like a reminder to schedule the consult automatically. And then we can send reminder emails automatically if, it's like an if then, if they haven't responded by this day, then send out this follow-up and things like that. And also the really cool thing about this is that, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but like, some people email, some people text, some people call, and you have to search like, oh, did this person send me anything? And you have to search in 10 different places and like secure messaging. In Wise Practice, you can take all of the texting, the calling, and the emailing, and it's like all together in the like client's contact information. So you can see when they texted, when they emailed, all in one spot, which is very, very cool. And it even that extra 2 minutes or 5 minutes that it takes you to go on the 3 different platforms you need to check, it's all right there.
It adds up. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I am going to do some homework on Wise Practice.
Yes, definitely do. If you have any questions, let me know.
Great. Well, this has been awesome. Yeah, I love just doing a deep dive into this kind of one aspect of practice management.
Yeah,
And
it's an important one.
It is. Maybe the most important. We're going to get people.
One thing we didn't talk about too is that the reason why you want to streamline your process is that each person, like, I guess so. Because I feel like somebody listening to this episode will be like, okay, that's great, but like, why am I doing all of this? That just seems like way too much work. And so the reason you want to do this is, one, making sure that every client has the same experience. And two, if each client has a different experience, how are you tracking your numbers, your KPIs, your key performance indicators? How are you tracking where people are falling off in the process? So if you're not onboarding people, you can look at, if you have the process in a standard operating procedure, so written down and everybody follows the exact same process every single time, are they falling off after the inquiry form? Okay, are you sending follow-ups? Are they falling off after the consult? Okay, what does your consult look like? Maybe do a role play and see, okay, what's going on in your consult? Are you asking the right questions? Are you doing, getting good vibe? And also making sure that they're the right client for you, because it's both ways. It's an interview both ways. And then, looking at, okay, well, you sent the consult follow-up, you scheduled their first appointment. Why are they ghosting and not doing paperwork? Do we need to send more follow-ups? Why did they not show up for their first appointment? Things like that. And so you can really see where your issues lie and be able to fix those. And that way, and again, you're caring for your client all the way through the process, regardless if it's in session or out of session.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've said on the podcast many times before that a lot of anxiety can be solved with math. And this is just another extension of that. If you have data. Math and communication. There we go.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, It's so true though. Like tracking all these things gives you a lot of insight into what's not working.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or what is working.
Yes, exactly. Because that's important too.
Sure.
You gotta celebrate those wins.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, this has been awesome. What can people do if they want to reach out or learn more about you? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah. If you want to learn more about us, our website is chock full of information. It's heybossco.com. You can email us at hello@heybossco.com. We're on Instagram, dropping knowledge. We send out a couple newsletters a month with, just tips and tricks and knowledge of how you can support yourself and how to, create efficiencies and just make your life a little easier. So sign up for that too.
Yeah. Sweet. All that'll be in the show notes, of course. Go check it out.
Oh, we also have in the show notes will be a freebie for anybody listening. It is just a quick PDF of client onboarding paperwork checklist. So you can really look at what you need for demographics, for therapeutic processes, for billing and all of that. So that way you can really audit what you have and then see if you need anything else.
Love it. Yeah, and like you said, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Perfect. So I'm going to close with the most important question of this whole conversation, which is, are you a Clemson or South Carolina fan?
Neither. I am a Hokies fan.
Okay, fine. Okay, we're done.
Delete the whole episode.
All right, fine.
Go Hokies all the
way. Okay. Seriously, appreciate your time. This is fun.
Yeah,
thanks for being here.
It's great conversation. Appreciate it, Jeremy.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Always grateful to have you here. I hope that you take away some information that you can implement in your practice and in your life. Any resources that we mentioned during the episode will be listed in the show notes, so make sure to check those out. If you like what you hear on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a practice owner or aspiring practice owner, I'd invite you to check out the Testing Psychologist mastermind groups. I have mastermind groups at every stage of practice development, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We have homework, we have accountability, we have support, we have resources. These groups are amazing. We do a lot of work and a lot of connecting. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the details at thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. You can sign up for a pre-group phone call and we will chat and figure out if a group could be a good fit for you. Thanks so much. The information contained in this podcast and on the Testing Psychologist website are intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no doctor-patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host or guests of this podcast and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of any mental health practitioner or medical provider, please seek one in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please find a supervisor with an expertise that fits your needs.